Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Brown, and welcome to February's Adelaide Office 365 user group meeting, our first one for 2020. So welcome, everyone. 2020, hopefully we're on a bright start and on a good start for 2020 versus previous years. For those of you who are new or unaware, my name is Daniel Brown. I've been running the user group for a while now. I originally set it up as the SharePoint user group, and over the years it's evolved into the O365 user group. And that's just a bit about myself. More on the user group. We meet on the third Tuesday of every month, February through to November. Traditionally not January or or December, given that the third week of each is still sort of holiday season. We're always looking for local speakers, even if it's a 15-minute presentation of something that you've done or would like to share or have exposure to. That way, always happy to accommodate. But as you'll soon see, I've got a lineup of speakers for this year, which is up until October, I believe. And we'll go through that in a sec. So what are the things the Office 365 user group covers? We generally cover everything Office 365, of course, mainly with a slight technology focus, obviously, with how do we do things and what can we use things for, but also, business cases and use cases of where technology can help or solve a problem. Of course, we do look at, development aspects. Hold on. Through SharePoint and through Office 365, through Teams, managing it and how it can be best practice to use in the organizations as well. So it's not sort of limited to very techie things. We do have a very high level presenter on today, Lewin from Microsoft Melbourne, who'll be talking at a high level and not so much a techie level. And we try to sort of cater for both those levels. We're also connected with the Australian Computer Society. It's based in Adelaide. It's also a national body. For today's meeting, you do get 1.5 hours of professional development time through the CP program, which goes towards your Sophia and certification membership. If you are not a member, I highly recommend checking out the Australian Computer Society. It is the league, the peak body for IT professionals. If you haven't heard the news, Microsoft Viva celebrates 1 year this month. Yes, it's already been 1 year since Microsoft Viva come out, so that has been spectacular. If you're not using it, I highly recommend checking it out, at least setting up a demo tenancy, having a play, having a look at how it can go together. It's certainly worthwhile. If you do need some demo tenancies, demos.microsoft.com can certainly help you out there. They can spin up tenancies and rehydrate those tenancies with users and content. So you can sort of play. Comes with small, medium, and enterprise versions. So definitely check that out as well. If you haven't heard, the successor to SharePoint 2019 was released last year as well. SharePoint Server Subscription Edition. It is the new modern SharePoint, essentially O365, a little bit of O365, but also the continued development of SharePoint 2019 with the enhanced people picker as well, and SharePoint Server 2022 support. I've been harping on this for quite some time because I have seen it still everywhere. IE 11 is dead. Yes, it's going to be a painful upgrade, unfortunately. But it's certainly worth it. Microsoft Edge, Chrome, and Firefox, certainly modern browsers that support much more features. As of August 17th, as the slide indicates, Microsoft M365 does no longer support IE 11 for accessing its apps. While that doesn't mean it will break, it certainly means you will have a depreciated experience, and some features may not work as time goes on. Migration path essentially for some features of IE 11, which is WebDAV, or the ability to sort of have map drives. The solution obviously for that is OneDrive for Business, syncing with SharePoint libraries. Likewise for the Explorer view, line of business applications will need to be updated to not have a dependency on IE 11, and likewise with toolbars and extensions, you'll need to get new versions of those as time progresses, but hopefully IE will be long in our past. Likewise with SharePoint 2010, it was extended during the pandemic, but as the pandemic progresses, it has eventually also been killed in support. There is still quite a bit of SharePoint 2010 floating around, so definitely upgrade those environments, as there's quite several bugs and they're deprecated and all that sort of stuff. There's much better options. At least get onto SharePoint sort of 2019. Likewise, SharePoint 2013 is coming into life in 1 year, so it's not all that far away now. Yet again, I've been saying this for about 2 or 3 years now, but the clock is starting to tick down, so start to plan now for 2013. 2016 and 2019, we've still got a little bit of time, but likewise with the other versions, it is becoming harder and harder to keep them up to date. So I would be very much starting to think of what your plan is going to be post 2026 in terms of content management, information management, documents, forms, workflows, and how that's really going to sort of play into your organization and business processes, because it's not going to be something that can just be lifted and shifted. This is going to be an integrated process, especially if you've got workflows and forms. You'll need to replicate those processes in your new chosen platform, whether it's SharePoint subscription server or moving to the cloud as well. The latest on-prem updates have also been released for 13, 16, 19 subscription edition, and also Office Online Server, which is a SKU of the SharePoint server there. Check out Stefan Gostner's blog. Certainly worthwhile. Has all the links for the downloads, patches, and updates directly to update it. They have changed a little bit of direction with the patches. They are now all inclusive. So if you have, one version of SharePoint, it will patch the editions. So, if you've got standard or enterprise in one download, you don't need to download multiple. We also have a Microsoft Press discount for anyone who wants to get some books, either hard printed copies or virtual copies. We can save you a few dollars on that as well. So grab a screenshot of that, write down those user codes, and grab some books at a discounted price. We've also got a confirmed meeting lineup of 2022 progressing, so we've only got a few more spots left. I am looking to get a few more deep dives and technical sessions going, but happy to fit in what we can. So as you can see, we're pretty much full up, with November being the only availability, with also potentially a small early meeting in December. But more on that obviously as we progress through the year. If you do have any suggestions or ideas for a topic, I will include links for the suggestion form. Let me know, and I can see one of the speakers can certainly put together a topic around that, which addresses that feedback as well. Other local groups in the area, although now is very much virtualized. There's obviously the 365 user group, the .NET user group, Data Analytics, PowerBi, Dynamics, Azure, IT Pro, and various ACS special interest groups, or SIGs, IT management and knowledge management groups as well. So certainly worthwhile checking out on that. We are on the usual, generally more so Facebook and LinkedIn rather than any other platforms. It's just the two that's most used by myself, so that's where I are. I do tend to push out what I can through those platforms as well. So with that said, we've got a few moments until Pen be available for our next session. Does anyone have any questions or queries or questions they'd like to ask in relation to O365 or the 365 platform in general? All right. So we might take a brief moment to just pause here while we just wait for Pan. because she's just running in between meetings at the moment. What I will do is, just let me grab this. So Pan Lewin, who is a senior director for Asia Pacific Microsoft in Melbourne, will be going over the frontline workers index trend. Where is it? Along hybrid work as companies look to return to the office as well. That is sort of happening in the global aspect. And we'll also be looking at the frontline worker January results in the World Work Index as well. So that's going to be interesting, as Microsoft has certainly pulled out some key trends in there, and we'll be looking at those as well. In the second session, we've got Will Wakelin from Hivemind Solutions. He'll be giving us an overview of MDM and going through various aspects of it, where it comes from, so say SCCM, and how it goes into MeCM as various products, the security and management of it, and run through any Q&A that anyone has as well. So feel free, if you've got any questions or queries, to let us know. If not, we'll just take a brief moment to pause, and I shall have Pan Lewin in a few moments on the line. Unless, Will, have you got anything to say that you'd like to chime in with, or are you good at the moment?
No, I'm good at the moment.
Yep, no problem. Just thought I'd offer it as well. No problem.
Actually, I will say one thing about the Internet Explorer end of life thing, Dan.
Yep.
Which is, it is interesting. I've started seeing clients migrating away from it to only Edge and other modern browsers. And so far, we're not actually seeing the issues I was expecting from things like the ATO and all that. So it's going to be interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the ATO is interesting, but I mean, they use Java, so boo on them. But at the same time, I mean, that's also a little bit independent, I suppose, of IE 11, but it still very is tied in there with like OSKey and stuff like that. But I mean, I must admit, I haven't seen a lot of the problems that everyone thinks they would have or thought they would have with the IE move. It's just, okay, well, now we're in Edge or now we're in Chrome. I mean, Chrome's got a lot of big traction anyway, and Edge is certainly being, picked up everywhere as well. Yeah, I'm not seeing a huge amount of problem with it.
Well, being Chromium based, most people who were using Chrome seem to be pretty happy to move a business across to Edge, and the fact that you can install Chrome add-ins to Edge is fantastic.
Yeah, that's been a big boost, I believe, as well. I mean, having used that myself, definitely. We're certainly seeing a big uptake of Microsoft Teams continuing to grow as well. That's certainly going to have a large impact on organisations as we move forward, certainly through the remainder of the pandemic and coming out of it as well. The modern intranet is certainly going to play, or Teams is going to play a big part in the modern intranet in terms of collaboration and content authoring together as teams, as individuals. And we've just got, oh, there she is. We're just about ready for you, Pen. So,
No
do you mind Pen or Penelope or?
You can call me Pen. My friends call me Pen. So all good.
Cool. No problem. So I will hand over to Pen. Let's just flick that one over. I'll stop sharing my screen. And just giving you presenter controls there. So I will hand over to Pan Lewin from Microsoft. I'll let you introduce yourself and what you do, and hand over to you. So thank you, Pan.
Awesome, thanks, Daniel. Okay, hang on. I'm just setting up my slideshow to go from the start. Here we go, and I'll share my screen with you all. Now, have you guys all got your cameras off, or is it just my view?
I think they're all off.
Oh.
I'm on my desktop at the moment.
Okay, it's actually really unusual for me to join a meeting where people have their camera off. So I will keep my camera on, so you can get the full experience. But I guess Daniel and I had a quick conversation on what we wanted to cover today, and I'll just give you a bit of background in terms of my background. So I am Senior Director with Microsoft Modern Work business. I'm part of a global team. I report straight into Corp, and what I'm about is landing new technologies and solutions into the market across the Asia time zone. And when we talk about the Asia time zone, it sort of spans from Japan to India, and helping all the field subsidiaries to look at the new innovations and how we take those to market with our customers. So I've been with Microsoft 23 years, and I started quite young, had many different and varied roles here at Microsoft, but certainly now, over the past couple of years with Modern Work, it's been an enormous amount of innovation and delivery of solutions, which, for someone that's been here for 23 years, I still feel really energized with what we're doing and what we're bringing to market. So I thought I'd just bring a few statistics and shout out, like, I think we've got quite a small forum here, so shout out if you want to dig into anything here, and we can provide more context. But certainly, over the last little while, we're really focusing on flexibility in how, when, and where people are working. We need to provide that resilience and that continuity for businesses as much as we can. And the way that we've approached our response to what has been 2 years of technical transformation or digital transformation has been through data, not dogma. We really said, right, we've got to have a data-driven, and this has been Microsoft forever, a data-driven approach and survey the market. So we've surveyed, over 30,000 people across the globe to really understand what's going on. And so this came out of the 2021 Work Trend Index report. So we're doing an annual Work Trend Index report. The next one is due out next month, and I'm really, really looking forward to the updated data to see if anything has changed. But essentially, what people are saying is 73% want flexible work to stay, or remote options to stay, but 67% want more in-person work or collaboration post-pandemic. So I'm one of those people that fit in those two buckets. So if you think of the Venn diagram, there's probably 27% that want to go straight back to work and stay there. And then there's another sort of 20-ish% who just want to stay at home. But essentially, we've got to think about employers providing for all these people, or they're going to walk, they're going to work, make choices in terms of what sort of work and environment they do their work in. So a few more statistics. 58% who plan to spend the most time in the office tell us they plan to do more focused work. 58% who plan to spend the least time in the office tell us they plan to do for more focused work. So there's this idea that people still want to have focused work. There's a lot of trends that have been saying our calendars have been packed with lots and lots of meetings, but essentially people want time to do focused work. That's what that's saying. We've heard about the Great Reshuffle. It's true. 41% consider leaving current employee. 46% planning major career transition. Then when we think about the solutions here, we think about where we do it. So do we do work same time, same place? So face-to-face interaction. Do we do it same time, different place? Synchronous distributed interaction, then different time, different place, same place. So there's this all these ways that we think about doing work. But essentially, the most important thing here is that we have a digitally connected or digital first approach to the way that we're doing work now. And that has to be like the way that from the CXO, CEO level down, even board level now, that the work has to be done digitally. And so then when you think about that, we think about, okay, well, how do we approach this? Like, what's a framework that I can think about the experiences, the technology, the operating model that allows me to approach and solve this problem? And so we've come up with a model. It's really people, places, and processes. And so let's dig into that a bit more and start off with people. When we think about people, particularly in this new era of work, we think of, I guess, three major personas when we think about enterprises. So information workers, they're mainly at their desk, they're mainly making decisions around information. They might be part of a process, they might be doing deep focused work, they might be a designer, an engineer, they might be a lawyer. There's all sorts of different sort of people that fit in that persona. Then we have the frontline workers. So most of their job is actually facing, customers or doing maintenance work or doing on-site work. And so they need different types of experiences with the way that they interact with technology. And then we think about flex staff. So flex staff could be someone like a doctor who consults at many different hospitals, could be someone like a consultant who has a number of different customers. And so when we think about solving it, we have to think about empowering these three different personas of people. So, and when we think, when we have looked deeper into what is happening with people and what's happened over the last couple of years, is that we have become quite disconnected from our place of employment, from our employer, and these statistics are telling us. So because we're doing lots of team meetings, we're feeling very bonded to co-workers, but 62% say leadership doesn't prioritise culture. Now, this is massive. If you think about pride in your workplace, you have that sort of connection to some sort of culture. 51% of non-managers don't feel valued. So if you go into an organisation, 1 out of 2 are pretty, they're pretty non-value. They don't feel cared for. And then high levels of stress and high levels of pressure mean that this view is that actually it's going to go out into 2022 that stress will stay the same or worsen. So 58% are saying that. So caring is the new currency, and we've been doing a lot of work to think about, what does this mean with our interactions and technology? But moreover, what do we give people, leaders, people like HR, people like there's new roles in companies called, the Chief Wellbeing Officer, the Digital Transformation Officer, the Employee Experience Officer, and they're all thinking about these sort of statistics and solving what these statistics are saying. Okay. When we think then about the frontline workers, they have traditionally been probably the most underserved population within organisations. But 80% of the global workforce are frontline workers, which is 2 billion globally, and 88% of organisations employ frontline workers. So, 9 out of 10 organisations have some sort of frontline worker interface. And we need to think about how we interface with those in this new era. Okay, so when we think about frontline workers, we think about what they're thinking, and this is just a colloquial example. Both my sons are at university and they have hospitality jobs. And the hospitality industry right now is bouncing back. There's not enough people to staff restaurants and cafes and so on. So they're really, the world is their oyster in terms of having casual jobs, and so they're bouncing around different employers. And some of the reasons, and this is from our work trend index, particularly on frontline workers, is why do they consider a job change? To make more money, to find a better work-life balance, not receiving pay increases, seeking better benefits, and more flexibility in how they work. So how do we think about that situation? So a couple of the things is like frontline workers are excited for new opportunities which tech creates. They think that tech ranks third on the list of factors that could help reduce stress behind pay and part-time work. 55% have had to learn new tech with no formal training. And 41% of frontline workers in non-management positions don't have the tech they need. So when you think about this, I think about, particularly in Australia, we're doing a lot of work with the mining organisations, with maintenance organisations, engineering organisations, the likes of Telstra, who have, millions of assets around the country where they have frontline workers, and they need the tools to be able to, manage their day, manage their tasks, get help and expertise when they need it, but also be connected and be part of the processes that help them do their job easier. So then, when we think about the solution, of course, we're going to talk about Microsoft Teams, and we see the take-up of Teams being enormous, but also the innovation that's come through, and being able to do things like meeting, chatting, calling, collaborating, and automating. And there's been a lot of innovation and a lot of customer take-up around the automation. So empowering the frontline workers, I think I've got a little video that kicks off here. Some ideas around this sales frontline worker. When she gets into the store, she picks up a shared device. She can see things like there's some assigned tasks for her, and her shift starts in 1 minute, so you can just clock in. Sure, you want to clock in? Yes. Let's have a look at the tasks that I've got to do before I start getting into it. I've got to stock my shelves. I've got my walkie-talkie, like you see in many of the stores these days, so that they can all be connected on the shop floor. She can get some approvals for a request around displays, attach an image, quickly get someone at head office to approve the display, and provide feedback as well. If the customer had some good or bad feedback, put that into the system straight away. So really, really nicely integrated into just one platform, one application, one device. As you can see there, you can scan things in as you would imagine, and a beautiful praise. Now, it's interesting, but things like that, things like praise, I'm just going to pause it if I can. Things like praise. So one of the things that I talked about before is culture of the organisation, and much of the feedback that we've received has been around celebration and recognition. So right in the tool, you can do things like praise and rewards, and actually have that come through the tool really nicely. So moving on, here we have her swapping shifts or adding shifts, setting availability, requesting time off, putting in the time that she wants away, and at the end of the shift, clocks out. So really, that's a really nice out of the box solution there for frontline worker in a retail example. So let's switch gears and we'll talk quickly around places. We're going to go back into the office. Now, we're going to have employees that want to keep the flexibility. We know that productivity is still there with a hybrid style of workplace where some people work from home, or many people work from home, or all people work from home. And so we really have to rethink, when we have people remote, how we use space and how we think about space. And so there's two sort of examples there. There's the one on the left where we've got actual real physical people in a room with a screen and other people joining remotely, digitally. And then on the right-hand side, we have this idea of the metaverse. And this is a proof of concept that we did with Accenture early last year, where this is a welcome experience. We have new employees onboarding, and this is just a way for them to feel comfortable and welcomed in this meta alt universe, if you want to call it that. It actually worked really well. They're really happy with the onboarding experience. It's called the Nth Floor, and they interact with each other, get to know each other in probably just a more less confrontational, less vulnerable environment. So let's drill down into a couple of these examples. So when we think about teams and we think about spaces and the technology now in the office, we think about designing it actually for people not in the room, as well as people in the room. And so we think about remote attendees having a seat at the table. So let's have a look at some of the ideas here. And so can you hear that? No, that's okay. That's good. Okay, it's coming through my system, but we might just go back and then I'll go forward again. Okay, so when you think about this, we think about we have a remote attendee coming into a virtual meeting like this. But I do want to call out a few things as we're going through this. So at a meeting room, you want to be able to walk into the room. So walk into the room, connect without touching anything, because we're all worried about, I guess, being I guess, not spreading germs and not touching everything and having to clean it all. So you can see the devices here actually know what meeting is happening, can register that you've moved into the room and can start the meeting right away. The devices, again, we've got beautiful, amazing screens and cameras. This idea of having virtual environments to make it more natural. We have our partners in the camera spaces create these environments where you can have everyone on the screen, and you notice that their shoulders and their faces are all level. That's actually a really nice, calming way to see people. So there's been a lot of investment and research and development on creating environments where it's calming, it's less stressful, it reduces, I guess, the burnout and the mental fatigue of having meetings constantly during the day. You can also see the bubbles come up. Again, that's nice in play interaction, the hand signals, the heart signals all coming through. Not big things, but certainly things that help interaction and help it make it more natural. Whiteboarding right there within the application, 3D object interaction, designs interaction. Lots of devices have been created over the last couple of years to make that nicer. What's coming up? Yeah, so then we have new technology that will allow the camera. So let's look at the camera. The camera comes in and actually makes that person, whether they're sitting in whatever chair they are, like equal to anyone that's in a remote location. Beautiful new microphones that are directional, that can actually tell who's speaking. So we can have the transcript say, okay, that was Quinn speaking. So we can have that recording of the transcript and go back and say, oh, who was actually speaking there? Okay, it was Quinn Campbell in the conference room. A lot of the time we've got whiteboards in offices. They're really nice and easy to use. They're, old school. We've been using them for decades. And what we've got here is a content camera so that a remote person can actually see what's going on, even if a person is in front of the whiteboard. Okay, we've got these new environments, so that again it's easier to view. It's nice and relaxed. Okay, so what's happening with the metaverse and immersive experiences with Mesh? So let me show you this example with that we worked with Accenture on. Okay, so essentially you can create your avatar. You can interact with this avatar. It's a reflection of your own identity and your own distinctive style. And the idea here is that we can create spaces and rooms so that people can interact. And I'm sure if you invited me back in a year's time, we will be having these sorts of experiences. And a nice way to welcome people, this was the Accenture model. They wanted to have a place where people across the globe could meet each other. They recruit thousands of graduates every year. And so as you're onboarding those graduates, you want to have this immersive experience as much as possible to bring through the culture, to have people get to know each other, to build networks, to understand people's skills and what they're interested in. And so this is a great way to do that. Across cultures, we've got the translation going on. And so, both can communicate whether they're speaking Korean or English. And then creating these spaces so that you can interact. So this is a bit of a view of Microsoft Loop here, where everything is hyper, I want to say hyper collaborative, right? So it's not just like a Word document, but you've got post-it notes, you've got tasks that are hyper collaborative. So I might be working on it from Melbourne, someone might be working on it from Tokyo, and it all syncs because we're all part, we're all synchronized as part of the cloud. Okay, so that's a little view of Mesh. The idea that we want to create these environments which are inclusive, they're productive, and we have things like centralized audio devices, encourage people to have cameras on, designate a moderator at one of the best practices that we recommend, and I swear by, is like who's hosting this meeting, who's driving this meeting, so that everyone's included. We get everyone's ideas, whether the camera's on or camera's off, but essentially we want to include everyone's ideas and really embrace this collaborative experience as well. So not just a technology solution. So we've got, great examples of where people have, massively gone to hyper collaboration here. So Teams. This is an example of an engineering company that does the overhead hardware for freeways, and they are across America, and they need to collaborate. So they have massively moved to Microsoft Teams to get things happening. Got an example here from New South Wales government. They had basically war rooms happening throughout the pandemic, and Microsoft Teams plus Surface Hub allowed them to have like the room, so physically people could be there to whiteboard and so on, but people could actually dial in as well and to respond to things. We have this is one in Victoria, the major traffic infrastructure play, engineering, consulting, part-time, workers, all collaborating on the one complex project across teams. And then we've got the level crossing project. So, a few examples there that I wanted to bring through. All right. Finally, we'll talk quickly around processes. So we think about process being ad hoc or creative processes, and then we've got the structured automatable processes. And so when we think about ad hoc processes, we think about Microsoft Loop, and there was a bit of it before in the Mesh example. But when we think about this, we're thinking about, everything now is hyper collaborative. Digital first, hyper collaborative. It's not, it's not the post-it note era anymore. So we need to replicate these ideas in a digital format. So from projects to handing out tasks to creating content, bringing people to where the content or where the decision is, using app mentions, linking into line of business systems like an SAP system or a dynamic system, and so that you can bring that content and bring the conversion of, I guess, the intelligence right into a project that you're working on. And you can see there people working together on marketing ideas. Okay. A few more examples, keynote speakers, again, lots and lots of, hyper, I call it hyper collaboration, but essentially, these are just units of data that we can bring together because we're, hyper cloud connected. Alrighty, and okay, so we've got Context IQ. It's really this idea of connecting with your line of business systems. Everyone's got a language within organisations, as well as helping you, like we've had on mobile technology, the autocomplete idea. Okay, and then we've got the dynamics. I just yeah. Okay, and finally, PowerApps. PowerApps has just been booming in terms of take up and adoption. Very easy to create applications. We call it the citizen developers out there. So people that really know what the process is, they can create their own application in PowerApps. Connect with data, trigger, decisions, send it off through the organisation. Organisations, and I'll mention Telstra have really adopted, and they've created their own Power App factory. In fact, so they've now got a catalogue of Power Apps and catalogue of processes that they can just pull in depending on the process they're addressing. All right. And how are we going? Okay, so finally, I just want to maybe just open it up in terms of, if there's ideas here that that you've been thinking about as well, in terms of the last couple of years has created this environment where organisations are either really stepping up to the opportunity or the challenge that's in front of them, or they're struggling. And there's there's many reasons for the challenge and the struggle, but I think and talking to people that are invested in the IT industry, I think this is a once in a generation challenge that means that we can actually make a massive difference to the companies that we work for and with, and the employees that we work with, and ultimately the customers that we serve. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to lead with great innovation, to leapfrog sometimes the legacy that we've been holding on to for years, because that's just the way it was done. And this is an opportunity to really think about, how do I take what might have been a legacy operation or process and leapfrog it into a pure digital automated, make it easy for everyone, make it flexible for everyone. So again, opening it up for a conversation that we can have. I'll share this with you, but there's obviously, we've got loads and loads of resources. The hybrid work guide, the work trend index is in this Microsoft.com work lab area, so you can get all the statistics as well. They're great to share with leaders in the organisation that are struggling to make decisions on what they prioritise first. So with that, Daniel, I think I had about this much time. So
yep. Has anyone got any questions or queries at all around what we're seeing, or do you have any specific question, Pen, at all, like in terms of like in the hybrid work or the hyper collaboration, what are we seeing? Or
sorry, was that a question?
Yeah, like, well, what's your question? Sorry, have you got any questions you want to put out there?
No, my question is, what are you guys seeing, and like what challenges are you seeing that we should be addressing?
Carl, you'll got your hand up if you want to chime in.
Yeah, sure. Look, I work with government information managers across ANZ, and that's an interesting place. They're in a very interesting place at the moment. It's the conflict between control and, I guess, agility. I'd be really interested to understand if there's a place we can go where people can see what other people are doing that's real and live, because that's the that's the biggest challenge. You know, I found one information manager who's gone really hard into 365 and that general tool set.
Yeah.
And I've got a series of webinars on once a month where he's just showing what he's doing.
Yeah.
And that's starting to get the conversation going. But we need a lot more of that stuff. And it's really, really hard to get people to share. So if you've got any comments on that or thoughts, or if you guys are doing anything, I would love to know what it is.
Yeah, look, that's a really good good point. So we share a lot. There's a lot of blogs, I guess, from a Microsoft perspective. There's MVPs that work in, you know, and there's probably some on the call, I don't know, that share a lot. There's I want to talk. There's.
Are you talking more so internal, Carl, as in like getting the sharing happening internally?
No, what I'm there's tons of stuff, and like, you know, I work with a bunch of MVPs, and so I've got access to those people. But there's a lot of stuff out there that says here's what you can do with the tools. There's a real lack of people saying here is what we are doing with them. You know, people in my role, in my type of organization, not me personally, you know, let's say government information management, you know, there is a lack of people who are out there in the community saying, here's what I'm doing. You can see it live. It's real. It's not vaporware. It's not something we're going to do. We're doing it. Here's where the bodies are buried. I'm just struggling to find people to show it, and I think that's key to accelerating the change into this. Because I mean, I think that I love the loop components that are showing up. You know, I love the agenda. As soon as the agenda item goes live in Teams, I think that's going to change what lots of people do.
Yeah.
I'm just really struggling to get people to show what they are doing in their organization, because nobody wants to go first.
Yeah, that's interesting. And look, I will say, like, we can only go so far. We'll do the hybrid work, you know, handbooks and all that sort of stuff, and we'll continue to do digital sharing. Like, I'm running a webinar next week on processes. But I think, you know, as part of that is this idea of just, you know, citizen sharing. So there's lots of people doing that, and I'd encourage you to, you know, any of you to do that and to share. I think the more we do that, the better. I don't have an answer, Carl.
That's okay. That's all right. You know, you ask, and, you know, maybe somebody knows. You know, maybe they've just got it off the cuff. You know, this person's great, that person's great. If anybody on the call is happy to, you know, works in that space and they're happy to share what they're doing in their agency, honestly, I'd love to give you a platform to do it. I just need people doing that kind of stuff at the moment.
Carl, are you state or federal government?
I'm actually a records and information management training company. So I have clients and I've worked in information management across all tiers of government for the last 6 or 7 years. I have clients at local, state, federal. I've got New Zealand government clients at local and central level. We have a business in the UK as well. We've got government clients there. We're just really struggling to get people to share. And there's a whole big conversation going at the moment about EDRMS versus Microsoft 365, which is completely the wrong conversation.
I've been there several times over because of compliance, and it makes it very complicated. But the reason I ask is, working in state government and rolling out Office 365 last year at Department for Innovation, we found that we were in the same tenancy as DPC, which is the state.
Yeah, they own your tenancy. Yep.
But we seem to be the first ones off the bat with rolling out such a comprehensive Office 365 program of work that was end user focused.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you share it?
Well, I can't. I'm not there anymore, so it's not mine to share. If that makes sense, I would contract you manager there. Yeah. But if you're in the state, that's why I asked whether you're in state or federal. Because if you're in the state government, if you've got a state government login, you can get to what we did there, which is called I am at DIS. So I am at symbol DIS. And there's like a whole website devoted to learning and what we call self-directed learning and the initiatives that were coming out through that to support it. But we were pretty much making stuff up from scratch. We didn't have anything to work with, and we certainly didn't get anything from DPC that was ready to roll for users. Yep. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. Having said that, I've also been in organisations like large resources where we've rolled out SharePoint, for example, and one of the things that I've found that's worked really well is actually doing case studies on the different groups and teams within the organisation. When you've got a big organisation like that, it's much easier if you can, do a little, A5 brochure, which was popular back when I did it, but obviously we're going more digital now, but some way to show a web page to showcase those internal champions that are doing stuff, and then providing everyone with it. Oh, hey, here's Sarah from accounts, and she's doing this with the tech, and it's like the next layer down. Obviously, you're probably really asking about public case studies, but I think
I'm asking for people I'm trying to find people who'll talk. I've got Karl-Heinz Sol, who's at the City of Marion, who you might actually know, running a webinar series for me. He's doing one a month, and he's showing live running stuff, which is like, that's the kind of thing that's really actually starting to put some momentum behind the change. I didn't really have
people need to see it. Yeah. They need to relate to it. They need to understand, how is it relevant to me? When they see one of their peers doing it, they go, oh, I could maybe try that. Actually, I didn't know we could do that. And it's not rocket science, right? But it is. It's about socializing it. Yeah.
Thank you. And I will reach out, Nathan. I know Nathan Hissey quite well. You probably used to work with him. So
yeah, I did.
I'll reach out to him. If there's something we can show there, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah. Nathan was definitely part of that movement there. So.
And this is also, I suppose, coming from my point of view, is certainly on the user group side, I'm always happy to have 15-minute sessions showcasing this, as I said in the intro, of what you've actually done. So if you've created a register or an invoice form or a uniform request or something that's actually real, I'm always happy to showcase that as well. Because I think that's the primary thing, is people want to see, how can I use, like PowerApps is the example, how can I use PowerApps? Well, I've got this blank thing, I need text boxes and an image. Well, what do I actually make? Well, you can make a few things, and as we've seen, today as well, there is a few bits and pieces there, but to see it in the real world, I think it is a big boon, and that's why I'm always happy to have those, those places as well. And I think that ties into what you're saying as well, Pen, Carl, is how do we showcase that stuff so it sort of gets that snowball effect, because as soon as people see it, they're like, okay, well, I don't need a uniform request system, but I need a perimeter checking system. Okay, well, now that I've seen it a little bit different, I can actually see how that will work in my mind in terms of PowerApps. And then, from there, it just spreads like wildfire.
Yeah, a little bit of pop psychology for all of you. There's an effect called the mere exposure effect. And basically what it says is that you like things more the more you've been exposed to them. So, if you've got something new to show people, show them again, show them at every opportunity. It's kind of what I'm trying to do, because I think that if I can get people through 12 months of webinars, they won't be thinking about whether they should anymore. They'll be thinking about what they can do. Mm-hmm. And that's the change that we need.
Yeah, no,
cool. Thank you. I've hogged away too much airtime.
No, not at all.
I just wanted to say something else to your point there, Carl, that I do think from the programs that I've been involved with, there's largely been the introduction of the change and the maturity around the learning and the education. And then once you can actually reach that tier, the next step up is then the knowledge sharing about how people are using the tool. But often that first learning curve is the hardest, and it does take a while before people get to that point, before they can start self-initiating those really great discoveries. They've had time to learn it and find that out. What's that, sorry?
Time to stuff things up. I mean, that's one of the things that's great about Karl-Heinz. He gets halfway into a session and he'll say, yeah, and we thought we started out doing it this way and then figured out it was the wrong way to go. But I mean, one of the big challenges for the information management market is that we tend to build things to last for 20 years at the start. And that's not really the world we live in anymore. And getting people comfortable with that experimentation and the fact that, you can stand up a SharePoint site and create a bunch of lists and some planner boards, and if it doesn't work, well, that's not the end of the world. You can do something with that. That's actually a really hard concept for people, taking that risk, I think. So. Yeah.
Carl, if you've got
Right.
access to the chat, I've thrown some case study links into that. One
Great.
from Microsoft and
Thank
one
you.
from others. But it is a good call out, and I think showing rather than telling is always a better way of doing things. So good call out, and I'll be passing that internally through to the other user groups as well.
I love how you found 174 case studies.
Yeah, well done.
Power of being.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
Fantastic. Is there any other questions or queries from anyone for Pen? Because I know she'll have to duck off shortly.
Yeah, I've got a dumb question actually. You guys probably already know this, but why is Microsoft Loop? It looks cool, but what is it? Am I the last one to find out?
Oh, I was waiting for someone else to jump in.
Pen, do you want me to jump in on that?
Hang
You
on.
jump in,
You mean
please.
you're not in the loop on that one? Sorry, I had to do it.
Hi everyone. All right, so there's
Here we
two
go.
aspects to that. One
Yep.
is one is loops, which are subcomponents. Think of the old object embedded linking, the OLE components that we used to have. So this is where you might have a spreadsheet, or you might have a whiteboard, or you might have something else like that. These are loop components that are going to be able to be embedded into other applications. So you might pop them into a Teams chat, for example. And so rather than it linking to an external application where you have to load up another application to access the content, it's going to be there inside the content, and it's all going to be live updatable as well. So it's a shared component rather than a static image. Microsoft Loop itself is going to be an application that allows you to do stuff with loops and other things, and all of that's still being worked on. So
yeah, it's still
watch this
very early
space.
days.
Okay, cool. I don't feel so uncool. Thanks.
The messaging is a little bit confusing. Hand on my heart, yes, Microsoft isn't the best at sometimes explaining things clearly in a marketing sense, and I have a marketing background, so I can make those sort of judgments. But yeah, watch this space, and we'll see this happen more and more, and it's going to be driven primarily through Teams, we expect to start with, and through Office components. But the way it is designed is going to sort of allow that to be an extensible platform and an extensible ecosystem, in the same way that OLE way back 30 years ago was designed to be sort of operating that way too. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
I think, and thanks, Pete. I think this is it's a really exciting opportunity though. So I go back to the challenge and the opportunity that we've got right now, right? So start thinking about how I'm going to put digital first, and we can only do the hyper collaborative digital first solutions if we have this sort of technology. And so if you combine the Loop components and Microsoft Loop as a whole, and then you think about mesh, and then you think about our Activision acquisition, you think, wow, this is actually we're going to be moving into digital first world where all my processes are digital. Mixed reality is becoming more and more normal. So there's some great examples and case studies using HoloLens. Telstra is looking at the HoloLens just being part of the kit bag of the maintenance people. So if they're out doing maintenance, that they can actually get that data right there in terms of, okay, I can identify this component. It was commissioned, 20 years ago. Its maintenance schedule is XYZ, and this is how you service it. So there's a whole lot of new ways of thinking of solving problems these days with this new technology.
Let me give you a real example of that. Some of you, I'll put my video back on. Some of you might know I used to work at SA Water before joining Microsoft. Back then, if there was a a rupture in a pipe, for example, or one of the pumps had caused problems, the people that were there first on site, if they couldn't fix it themselves, would sort of take some emergency measures to try and mitigate the problem and take lots of photos, and then take those photos back to head office where the engineers were. And then the engineers would be sitting around in a room, and then they'd try and work out what was going on. And then they'd pass the information back out to some crews who might be out there by the telephone and try and talk them through just via audio to how to fix things. And if that didn't work, then they'd have to send some of the engineers out there to escalate things. That's why things used to take a long time. With mobile phones, what they would then do is they'd have video calls. So they'd grab a whole lot of engineers into a room, and then they would project up on a screen what somebody was seeing on their phone, and then they'd be able to tell the person to look around the room and then try, once again, talking them through what they were seeing on the screen to how to fix the problem, or at least, mitigate the dangers until they could get something better going on. What we're talking about now with HoloLens, in particular, and the things that Penn alluded to, is that as part of that kit, they put the HoloLens on. The engineers don't need to be gathered in a room. The engineers don't even need to be in the same building. They can automatically redirect the call to whichever skill set is required and whichever engineers are available, so they're not having to wait to get hold of people. Those engineers can see things on their screens. They can draw on their screens or point things on their screens with their mouse, which will then do an overlay through the HoloLens to the person, so they can exactly see which knobs to turn, which nuts to tighten, which other things to do, right there in real time. And so what we're doing is we're compressing the delays that reality imposes on these processes by digitizing it and allowing that telemetry to flow both ways. That's the main goal. It's really empowering the individuals, particularly the frontline workers, to be able to do more and feel more accomplished, rather than saying, this is outside of what I'm able to do, I have to call in somebody else to do it and then watch over their shoulder. They get to be more hands-on in doing things. And this translates into the training environment as well. So they can, because they're doing this through HoloLens, they can record a lot of this sort of stuff. They can then replay that back in a training scenario, so that people can actually experience this and see how they could fix things in a training environment using the HoloLens, so that if they do see something in reality, they can then jump on and have a much better chance or more confidence in fixing it straight up. So ultimately, that well-being that Penn talked about to start with, and trying to encourage people to feel more confident about their jobs, that all falls back to Microsoft's mission statement about trying to empower every person and organization to achieve more. We don't want them to be reliant on Microsoft technologies to do things. We want Microsoft technologies and any other technologies that that come along with that to help them be able to do better at their job.
Yeah, that's good. The HoloLens is certainly going to play a big role in that, I think, certainly in the training aspect. Before you get onto the forklift these days, you've got the simulator. So before you go out and fix the pipes, Pete, as you said, you've got the simulator as well, to get you up to speed with it all, and have that information from multiple sources coming. And this is where, say, Loop or Viva sort of come in. It doesn't matter where that information comes from, if it's Teams or SharePoint or email or wherever it is, you'll have access directly to it, and allows you to sort of have that confidence to proceed. Anyone have any other questions or queries or points before we let Penn go and hand over to our next speaker, who is Will, waiting in the wind? No. All right. Well, thank you very much, Penn. It has been a very awesome session. So I do appreciate you taking the time to come to our user group. And it's very, very much appreciated. So thank you very much again.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Later. Bye.
Thanks. If you do have any questions or queries, please feel free to shoot Penn LinkedIn email or message. She'll more than happily respond as well. So with that, I will hand over to our next speaker, Mr. Will Wakelin from Hivemind Solutions, to talk a little bit around some MDM and some MDM, SCCM, all the other acronyms under the sun, especially in the SCCM world. So thank you very much, Bill, and I'll now hand over to you.
Too easy, thanks, Dan. So I always struggle a little bit to know how much knowledge people will have going into these sessions with things like MDM. But I guess to pivot off of Pen's presentation, she was talking about what's possible and how you can utilise things to collaborate and things like that. The next step, I guess, is mine, which is how do we get those kinds of programs onto people's devices, and how do we make sure that people's devices are capable of doing the things that we're talking about. So I guess I'll just start with, please ask any questions as we go. I tend to respond to feedback as it comes, otherwise I get to the end of the session and forget what I've talked about. So feel free to ask questions. My name is Will Wakelin. I'm the owner and managing director of Hivemind Solutions. I've had over 10 years experience in the MSP space, and during that time as a tech, I specialised in SCCM, and the natural progression of that was into Intune, which is MDM. Now, I guess to talk a bit about the way I do things at the moment, Adelaide's a really interesting space, especially during the pandemic, because companies know they need to adopt a lot of these technologies that Pen was talking about, but it's a really slow process, especially as Carl mentioned before in government. Trying to get them to adopt and adapt to these new technologies is a really difficult thing. So I guess from my point of view, I tend to tackle that from a security perspective and start leading with security to get them to where I want them to be. And that's with mobile device management, or Microsoft Intune, or as it's now known, Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Microsoft Endpoint Manager is a really interesting product set, which now also, as Dan mentioned before, includes SCCM, or Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager. I'll try to avoid too many acronyms, but the reason I use... yeah, and the reason I'm happy to use all of these in conjunction is because Microsoft isn't that great at sort of sticking to one thing. So if you go through the Microsoft Intune portal, which I'll show you in a little bit, it goes from Intune to Microsoft Endpoint Manager and back again. And so it's a little all over the place, but we'll forgive them in this instance. Now, I guess in this I won't say post-pandemic because it's still going. In this pandemic world, the remote workforce has become even more distributed, as Pen mentioned before, and we've got a lot more of our people working remotely. There's a lot more requirement for people to be utilising their own devices, or for companies to then provide devices they've never previously provided to their end users, such as mobile phones. Now, companies need a way to manage these users and their devices to ensure that the company's data is secure, the users are protected, and that the devices themselves are maintained. And that's where MeCM comes in. I was hoping to get a PowerPoint going today, but due to various outages, I haven't had much of a chance. So what I'll do is I'll show you some of the Microsoft Endpoint Manager suite itself. And I can sort of talk you through some of the stuff in there. Just bear with me while I hunt down my tab. I've got far too many things open as always. So for those that haven't seen it before, this is the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. Now, you might go, why do I want this? Why do I need a mobile device management suite? In its very name, it talks about mobiles. So people immediately think Android devices, iOS devices, things like that. Microsoft have started the process of making them a successor to SCCM. At this current state of time, both products are considered to be the same thing. If you purchase Microsoft Endpoint Manager, you get your rights to your CALs for SCCM, and vice versa. If you buy SCCM or Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, you get your rights to Intune or MeCM. So as you can see here, it actually does a lot more than just iOS and Android devices. It does Windows devices and is very much natively compatible with Windows 10. Increasingly, we're seeing more Mac OS stuff in here. It was probably only, I think, in December last year that we were able to actually deploy Mac applications via Intune. So watch this space especially. But when we're talking about Windows, iOS, and Android, this is a really solid product. And luckily, I guess, it became a full enough MDM that it was able to cope during the start of the pandemic. Prior to that, it was still a bit buggy. It was still missing a few things that really it needed to have. So when we're looking at these devices, we can do Windows 10, Windows 11, we can do iOS, iPads, Mac OS X, many types of Androids. I find that Samsung are actively collaborating with Microsoft, and so Samsungs tend to work the best. But there's a few other Android type things cropping up, including, of all things, BlackBerry are starting to make somewhat of a comeback. The other really cool thing with Windows, to touch back to the end of the Q&A with Pen and the team there, is that this isn't just Windows 10, Windows 11. This is IoT. This is Azure Virtual Desktop. This is Microsoft 365. This is any of the Surface devices, including Surface Hub and HoloLens. So we can actually deploy applications from here to HoloLenses as well. So I guess to get a bit of an idea from the group here, how much experience have people had with MDMs in general, not just Intune?
I've only had limited experience, to be honest. Yeah, I think most people have none or limited experience.
My experience with MAMs and MDMs goes back probably 10, 15 years, but not a great deal recently. Yeah,
it's a funny space to work in because it's constantly evolving, especially with some of the stuff that's going on with the pandemic sort of requirements for the work from home environment. So I guess we can assume that people have a relatively lowish understanding of it, which is sort of what I was aiming for. So I'm glad. Mainly because this is my own Intune environment, and as always, the mechanics car is always in the workshop, so it's probably not the best one to be showing you guys, but this will do at the moment. So I guess the reason that's a bit of the what is this? What is Microsoft Endpoint Manager? A lot of people tend to be using it just for Windows and Windows 10, and they tend to ignore any of these other devices, which is a real shame because really these are the devices you really want to be targeting. And the reason for that is 60% of endpoints in an enterprise are actually mobile devices. And the average smartphone or smart device has over 80 apps on it, which if you consider that in an unmanaged scenario, where you've got a business with, say, 700 Windows laptops, they're forgetting about 60 up to 60% on top of that are unmanaged, unsecured, and uncompliant for their needs. And people go, oh, well, it's just a mobile. What does that mean to a business? Well, 90% of breaches also start with phishing. Now, when we consider that, again, the same sort of number, roughly 60% of all emails are read on a mobile device, you can see where things start to line up, where people really need to start adopting to these kinds of technologies to manage these remote workforces, their mobile devices, and things like that. Now, people would go, well, that seems like a lot of work. It's not a lot of work, and people are worried about their personal data, their personal devices. A lot of companies, especially in Adelaide, don't provide their users with mobile devices. They're starting to with the pandemic occurring, but it's still a long way off till we see companies providing all their users with, you know, a laptop and a phone. And sometimes they might get one or the other. and they have to work from it and be useful within their organisation. So when we talk about this management, if someone is enrolling a personal device, such as an Android, they can enrol their device in a two-state way, which allows it to have both a work profile, which is an encrypted secure container with their work data, their work applications, things like that. And then their personal use stuff is completely separate. They've got no risk of losing that. Whereas if they leave the company and they then are no longer allowed to access their work profile, that work profile is securely removed, and because it's encrypted, obviously they can't get the data from there. So it's a really good way of allowing people to maintain their personal space while allowing a company to make sure that their particular apps, whether it be Outlook, Excel, any even third-party apps that potentially you might have a finance manager who accesses my cloud via their phone, it ensures that that container is secure and able to be removed if required without damaging the end user's device. Now, there's a second part to that, which is the MDM versus MAM discussion. MDM, or mobile device management, is when a company has control of the user's device. MAM is mobile application management, which is where a company has access control over specific applications. Now, in a BYOD, or bring your own device scenario, this is actually the way that people really should be looking to go, because this acts on another level to what I just described, which is having a work container. This containerizes each app on the user's device. So you can remove a particular app from a user. Perhaps it's something that's no longer being used by the company, or is in some sort of production, needs to be updated. And this means that the company doesn't have control over the user's device, but does have control over individual applications. Now, in Intune, or Microsoft Endpoint Manager, you can have both enabled. However, MAM will not work unless a device is enrolled to MDM. So it seems a little bit pointless to have both involved. So often people need to be considering whether they need MDM in their business or whether MAM is actually the way to go. Let's just have a look. Sorry, I'm just going through some of my notes to make sure I'm not missing things. So if a device is enrolled, so for instance, we can see here that I've got a Windows device enrolled. The company can control a certain amount of things on my device. Sorry, I went too far back there. In this particular case, I've listed this device as a corporate device. This means the company has 100% control on this device. However, if I'd listed this as personal, it would do something similar to what I was discussing before, in that the company won't have full access. You've probably seen this for anyone who's got kids and their kids' schools are using Azure or 365 for Teams and things like that. Their kids are having to join their computer or laptop to their school. Now, it doesn't mean that every school's got Intune enabled, but if they do, they would see all the kids' laptops and things start cropping up here, and it means that they can put some provisions in place to protect the children and their own network from things. And that's done with compliance and configuration policies. And the way to kind of consider what these two things are, is configuration is what it says. It's configuring the device and telling it what to do, what settings to have enabled, so on, so on. Compliance is saying, cool, I know what I've got configured, but is it actually meeting my requirements? Do I need to tweak this? Or despite the fact that I've configured something, has the end user managed to change something on their device, even though they shouldn't be able to? Have they been able to change something that now makes this device non-compliant? And then what's the resultant action from that? So for instance, that might be, you must not have any other browsers installed but Microsoft Edge. And that's your compliance policy. Someone somehow manages to bypass something in the configuration profile that says you can't do this, and they install, they get administrative access to the computer or whatever, and they install Chrome. This would then crop up and go, hey, this is no longer compliant. And depending on your policies from that, you can either say, okay, this is actually a security risk and this is really important. You are immediately not allowed to access work resources, or, hey, please fix this within the next 7 days or we're going to remove this access. So it's quite a powerful tool, especially with Windows. And a lot of the Windows stuff is really being built for Intune, Microsoft Endpoint Manager. As you can see here, there's sort of update rings and ways to replace older technologies such as WSUS with Intune to provide things like updates and make sure the device is up to date. Another really common one in compliance policies will be you mustn't be more than 2 months out of date with updates. This would be how you tell it what to update. Obviously, if for whatever reason someone's turned their computer off for 3 months and then they turn it on, immediately the machine would go, oh, I'm not compliant. I either need to update or I don't get to access work data, whether that be Outlook, SharePoint, whatever that is. The other part with Windows as well is that this can be used to image machines with Windows Autopilot, which is a really, really powerful product that Microsoft have developed. Autopilot allows an administrator, such as myself, to configure a list of, that moved it for me, a list of applications, things that are required for Windows when it's installed on a machine, or after your out-of-box experience, should I say. Now, Autopilot allows a company to buy, let's assume we're buying 100 Dell machines, 100 Dell laptops, whatever it is. We can actually ask Dell, HP, Lenovo, whoever the vendor is, to actually upload the hardware hashes of those devices to Intune. And Intune can then recognize them as being attached to it and manageable in that way. When the user first starts the machine goes into a process, which is the autopilot process, and automatically sets it up and configures it as per the company configuration, policy, applications, security. So it's really awesome that we don't have to rely on older technologies such as WDS, even SCCM to an extent, to image machines so they're ready for a standard operating environment for the users. What I will caveat that with is that the reason that Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager are considered to be all part of the same product is because of the limitations within Intune. It's not able to do a full-blown task sequence. It cannot go if this, then this, then this, then this, then this. It's a much more chaotic method of going, here's the stuff you're allowed to get, here you go. Now, there's ways you can get around that with scripts. You can use PowerShell scripts and push them out from Intune to affect the end user's computer, but it doesn't do full-blown task sequences as MeCM still does. So sometimes organizations will actually have to make a decision on whether Intune's the right product for them, or whether they need a hybrid of the two, or whether they just need SCCM. I haven't actually found one that just needs SCCM or MeCM anymore. They usually adopt a hybrid way of doing things. For instance, you can take away things like, you can take away things from your traditional services such as Active Directory and SCCM, like BitLocker, move it across into Intune and get this to manage it and take that load off of your on-premise environment. So there's a lot of additional things that this is actually starting to do that are no longer required on-premise if you still have an on-premise environment. When we talk about Windows and deploying applications, things like that, you can deploy quite a few, you can deploy all of the 365 apps, you can deploy any MSI, and now you can start to deploy XE files with the Intune wrapper, which can actually wrap exe files into a special type of Intune aware file. So you're really not limited by what you can deploy anymore. Once upon a time, you could only do MSIs or even some very limited 365 things. But when we talk about iOS and Android, they actually can be connected directly to their consequent app stores, for instance, the Apple App Store or Google Play. And from a business perspective, you can sign up for the business versions of these. And you can actually purchase applications for your end users and have them deployed and all managed within Intune itself. macOS is, again, similar in that it connects to the Apple Store, but you can actually get the executables for that and deploy them from here as well now. I just think any questions at that point, just in case I've missed anything or jumped over anything too quickly.
I'm good as anyone else. Got any questions or queries?
I must be doing a good job then. That's all right. It is a lot of information to take in. And really, this is just a, hey, here's a really cool thing. This is what it does. Again, Carl sort of mentioned it before. This is about starting to get people thinking about what they should be doing. So Pen's thing before was showing about, here's all the really cool stuff we're about to do, and here's how we're going to do it. This is more the technical side of things. Of, okay, well, we need to manage that stuff. How are we going to do it? How are we going to make sure that everybody's got teams? Well, Intune's a really good way of going, okay, it doesn't matter what device you're on. You need teams. Here it is. Now you can collaborate. Things like that. Now, I mentioned right at the start that my lead into this is often security focused. And some of the stats I said before are the ones that I base off, you know, the fact that so many people are using mobile devices without any sort of management. There's no security on these things. If someone answers an email, even with two-factor authentication and all this other stuff, if their phone gets compromised with a man-in-the-middle attack, things like that, because they haven't got any management, well, the whole organization's at risk, right? And that's where you start going into the security side of things. Can you guys still see the screen?
Yeah, no, coming through all good.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, I'm never sure with this because it sometimes drops out. So from here, you can see that there's a whole heap of security stuff that's been added into Microsoft Intune. And it seems that they're starting to pull stuff out of Azure AD and move it across here. For instance, conditional access is fully manageable from here. And as you can see, you know, I've got the very most basic ones that every organization should have, which is no legacy auth, MFA, MFA. Now, I think this portal is probably going to grow a fair bit more with Microsoft Defender growing as a product. It may even be that this actual endpoint security part just is a tab within Microsoft Defender. Now, you can see here that there's your device view, same old, same old. However, you can apply security baselines, which are Microsoft best practice sort of baselines and the like. These are really powerful tools if you don't really know what you're doing. Often you can just turn them on and see what happens. If a user complains, well, something needs to be fixed in the process that the business is using. I wouldn't recommend just turning it on for an entire organization. I'd rather people try it with one or two, but these are really great things to use to see, to get a bit of a gut feel for where the organization is at for a device level security thing. So antivirus as well is something that's moving increasingly into here. Now, when we talk about Defender, we usually talk Windows Defender. Defender Preview has just been updated to include Android devices. So you can actually get Defender on not just your Windows devices, but also your Android devices. As to when this, yeah, Pete's correct there, nothing good happens after 2:30 on a Friday. Yeah, so you can now secure more and more of your devices using Defender. Obviously, iOS and OS X aren't included in that yet. Now, I have no doubt that they will eventually come across and be available, but at this point, it's just the two types. As I showed before, you can control BitLocker from here and various other policies such as firewalls, things like that. And even to an extent, if you've got the correct licensing, your EDR. Now, EDR actually can work on your iOS and Android devices as well, if they're managed via this method. And that really is absolutely invaluable in this day and age with the increase in cyber attacks since the pandemic started. So you've got this great system for managing devices. They've made your devices more secure. They're helping your people to deploy applications, things like that in a much better way. Well, what more can you do with it? One of the really, really useful things that Microsoft Endpoint Manager can do is its reporting stuff. Now, I don't have a lot of this stuff set up because I'm only one person at this stage, but if I'm a business and I want reporting, previously I would have relied on SCCM and its ability to utilize SQL report server. SQL report server can connect to PowerBi, and in ways you can get quite a lot of really good information out of that. Obviously, with this being native to 365 and Azure, it kind of skips that SQL part and just goes straight to PowerBi. And you can actually create Intune data warehouses to collect all the information from all of the devices in your organization. Depending on, obviously, on the level of enrollment they've got, you're not going to be collecting people's personal information, but you are going to be keeping data that is relevant to your organization. And you get some amazing, really cool reporting out of this. You can also connect these to log analytics workspaces. And even if, and I haven't run into anyone using it yet in Adelaide, but if you happen to have Azure Monitor, you can attach this into the workbooks so that you can create automated responses to particular events. For instance, if 50 devices suddenly become uncompliant, there's a problem, go fix it, that sort of thing. So this is a really important place to know about in Intune. And one of the things I often get is, how do I troubleshoot Intune? How do I do things within Intune if I don't know what's going on? This is the space to troubleshoot enrollment failures, application deployment failures, things like that. Obviously, as always, and this is the same with SCCM, you need to go through logs. If things get really bad, logs, 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 and it's always about logs. And to give a little bit of history on that, you got to remember that Intune kind of has come from the grounding of SCCM. And SCCM, which came from SNS, is in itself a very big product with lots of different moving parts that don't necessarily talk to each other, because when it was created, Microsoft sort of set up all these different teams to create it, and they didn't necessarily collaborate as they would now. And they kind of made it work, and it worked a little bit. And nowadays it's a really powerful product, but the reality is sometimes it just does odd things and you have to go through logs. By proxy, Microsoft Endpoint Manager has come from that foundation, and sometimes it just does weird things. And this is a consideration to take in if you are going to administer this. Sometimes you'll go do something, everything you've done is right, it's just not working properly. And you'll just have to go through logs until you can find enough stuff. Obviously, the one great thing about using this product is the support teams are awesome. Microsoft support with Microsoft Endpoint Manager is some of the best support I've actually ever experienced, and their response times are fantastic. So if you do have problems with this, you'd have a friend in Microsoft. They're not going to leave you out to dry like back in the old SMS and SCCM days. So as you can see here, everything is healthy, but same as Microsoft 365, this will actually tell you if there's status outages in our region, things like that. So it's a very easy to use product, but it's connected to everything in your environment, same as Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager would be. So you need to have a little bit of an understanding of your environment to really be able to take full advantage of this. However, this is also a really good way to get an understanding of your environment. Once you start getting devices enrolled, you can go, oh, I didn't know that we had 60 iPhones and 10 Androids. I thought it was the other way around. That sort of information that's really invaluable to understand how your business does work. So how are people underutilising it? Well, people aren't using it. It's probably the first space. A lot of companies that should be utilising this sort of product really aren't bothering with MDM. With the pandemic, we saw a very big uptake in that, and that's part of how I was able to start my own business. But the reality is not enough places are really taking the threats seriously enough that this does cover. I'll just close this one down, because there's nothing else interesting to show on there. Now, as I discussed before, it requires an understanding of how your business operates and how you want to administer your end users' data. And that comes down again to that MeCM versus MDM discussion I had before, which is, do we monitor just the apps or do we want control over the entire device? That's really what it comes down to when you were talking about this sort of thing. And in most cases, most companies are still focusing on the devices, which is not a problem at all. In fact, I prefer the MDM side of it, but sometimes, for instance, if you've got a school that has 600 students, you don't necessarily want to be managing their devices, but you do need to make sure that they're getting the correct applications to do their schoolwork and that they're secure. And so that's where MeCM really fits in. And the other thing, like I said earlier, is that people really use this for Windows 10 quite a bit already, but they fail to use this for Android and iOS, which is really disappointing because Samsung and Microsoft have developed a really strong collaborative partnership, and they're doing some really cool things in the mobile device space, especially with Microsoft 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop, which are, I guess, the love children of the old RDS servers. These things are optimized for Android Samsungs. They allow people to connect their mobile phone to their monitor and get a desktop-like experience and get the full Windows suite working seamlessly. So again, these are sort of left of field of MDM, but these are the kinds of things that MDM sparks, and it starts these processes for businesses and how they can get their users to have a better work experience, whether they're remote or in the office. I will drop a few MVPs in the chat as well, who are sort of the people that I follow. I know there's some familiar names in the chat list, but some of the MVPs like Anup Sinair, Prajwal Desai, and even the System Centre dudes out of Canada, although they focus more on SCCM, by nature of where the products are going, they're leaning towards Intune. And all these guys provide really awesome information. And of course, you've got Docs.Microsoft, which gives you a plethora of information if you can read through it and understand what it's trying to say. Yeah, any questions?
I think I'm all good. I think everyone's good. For now, I mean, given that we've only just had limited exposure to it for the most part, I think it was really good to sort of go over it and see what we could do with it, and certainly how we can use it. Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I forgot to mention before, one of the really big things that it's underutilized for is, ironically, PowerApps. Because yeah, if you want to have a frontline worker able to scan barcodes, awesome. Create a PowerApp, it does that. You can scan the barcodes, get the data back into your dynamic SharePoint, whatever it is. But the thing that's been missed here is that, cool, the worker's more efficient, but are they more secure? Have you got app protection policies on that PowerApp? Have you protected the in-house apps that you've created to make your workforce more efficient? And that's really where Intune comes in that space. No, definitely. Anyone got any questions or queries? No, we're just up against the clock now, so I won't hold up anyone too much more longer. So thank you very much, Will, for your presentation. It was very much appreciated. Certainly learned a few things myself in terms of
next time I'll try and
Intune
get some
and
PowerPoints.
Nah, it's all good. I think, I mean, we don't have to do death by PowerPoint. I mean, seeing a real environment is always great as well, because it is real. And I think, you know, almost going back to what Carl was saying as well, we're actually seeing a real living, breathing environment. So it's good, even if it is just your environment, it still is a production environment.
Yeah, and to answer Pete's thing there, never trust your user.
That's what RBAC's for.
Oh, here we go, Marcelo now.
if you don't trust your users, then they really shouldn't be your users, or you should be putting other order controls on them. But the other extent is the extent to which you trust your users.
Yes.
Is important there as well. If people feel like they're under the thumb too much or being controlled too much, then they'll try and find ways to circumvent security, and there are always ways to circumvent security.
And we've certainly seen that in the document space as well. Drafts, versions, approvals, desktop versions, email. It all just is so easy to circumvent, unfortunately, just because of the nature of how it is, and people are very ingenious.
Security should be a productivity enabler, rather than an obstacle to that, and that's a mindset that some organisations really need to work on fixing. But yeah, if you are going to be doing this and you're quite open into why you're putting MAM or MDM on their machines, on their devices, particularly their personal ones, then make sure that you set limits on yourself, so that not only are you expecting them to do the right thing, but you're showing by example that you're doing the right thing as well.
Correct. Absolutely.
Excellent. All right, I'll just share my screen for the last couple slides. Is my screen? Can everyone see me or Will?
We can see your screen.
Okay, cool. So thank you very much, Will, for your presentation this month. It is greatly appreciated. Next month, once it clicks again, is on the 15th again, just by how it works out, the third Tuesday. So we're on the 15th, geez, it's only Tuesday. And we are doing it via webinar again. We have Michael Knoll returning to the user group again, and also Cameron coming back for another deep dive session in March. So look out for the links. The link is there. It does have early bird registration. I am just waiting on topics to come back and speaker blurbs. But early bird registration is up and registered, and we will be doing it. So thank you, everyone. That does conclude today's meeting. So thank you, everyone, for taking the time this afternoon to join and present. Obviously, Pen and Will as well. Thank you very much. And that's it. If anyone has any questions or queries, feel free to stick around and ask. But also feel free to hop off the call if you need to head off. And just on that note too, I will be publishing the video of this afternoon's event as well. Takes a little bit to transcribe or transcode, download it. I've actually got some stuff on tonight, so keep an eye on it sometime this week. It should make it on its way to YouTube and various channels as well. As I said, if you do have a suggestion for a topic that you'd like to do, I will be posting those links shortly. And I'll get those out as well. And if in that case, I will see everyone hopefully next month. So thank you, everyone, and have a great night and enjoy the rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.